In the previous video, we covered the @injectable syntax and why we need to use it because we are using an external dependency called HTTP, which we have imported from Angular. Now, in this video, we're going to learn how to use the HTTP module with observables. So what I want you to do is essentially grab all of this data and just simply copy it. And what we'll do is delete what we've got. Now, if you hop over into the db.json, which you can see down here, so yours will be an empty object at the moment. What I've actually done is gone and converted all my data to JSON. Now you can see here the most important thing is I have an object property called passengers. So create an object with a key of passengers and then paste your array in and then convert it over to JSON. Now we're not going to do these because it will take a while for this video. So I'm going to assume that you've done that. So you have a final product that looks like this with everything as valid JSON. So once you've done that, you can simply save it out and exit. So now we've injected a token of HTTP. It's now available as this.http. So we can do this.http and we can just do get. Now our passenger API is actually set up to a API/passengers. So what we're going to do is create a constant here. So we'll do passenger underscore API and then equals /API. So I'm actually using the local server here and then /passengers. So create this constant and then we can reference it below. I'm going to add the type of string as well. So what we're going to do is pass this passenger API into our GET request. So you can see here it says type observable response is not assignable to type passenger array. So because we're returning this.http, that is in fact an observable, not our passenger array. So what we really want is to return an observable with type passenger. What we need to do is import this observable object from up here. So we can just do simply import observable and then from rxjs/observable. And we'll actually have another error now that we fixed this one, which we'll explain momentarily. So we've imported observable and we've now assigned the correct type of what we're returning from this function. Now I'm going to bump this onto a new line. Now what we're going to do is something called map. Now you've used this in JavaScript, so we do .map. Now what we actually get in this map call is the response object. So if I quickly delete this a second, you can actually see type response is not assignable to type passenger array. So when I uncomment this, we're actually going to get the response object because that is the next method that's called via Angular. So we can do our arrow function inside of here. And all we want to do at this point is return the response, and we can use this .json. Then we call this JSON method to actually extract the data as a JSON object. So you can see that this type cannot find name response. All this is a simple type check in Angular. So all we need to do to fix this technically is add the word response. Now at the minute we have one problem. We have property map does not exist on type observable. Now map is just like a JavaScript function. You can see that you can map over something or a collection. So all we need to do, because the HTTP is in fact an observable and we've imported the observable operator, we've said that we're returning an observable, we just need to import this map operator. So we'll do import and then rxjs/add and then /operator and then /map. So that's all we need to do to import and add properties to observable things such as this.http. Now you can see here that the red underline has disappeared because map has now been added to the HTTP observable object. So this is some nice magic that's happening here. And if I go back and I can uncomment this, our error comes back and we'll just go up and fix this. Now to finish this off, we will just use a shorthand arrow function and go and wire this up correctly in our component. So you can see how this is nice and clean, and observables don't need to be complicated. If you want to use them, you can simply import something such as map and then bind it to something in Angular because Angular uses the reactive paradigm. So things like get, we actually need to return an observable and then subscribe to them. So if we open up our dashboard component, you can see we have this red underline. So let's take a look. It says type observable passenger is not assignable to type array of passengers. So what we're actually doing here is trying to assign an observable response to this.passengers. So this is actually incorrect. So what we'll do is delete this and delete this. So what we're going to basically do on init, which as we discussed in a previous video, on init is where you should do initialization logic. We're actually going to use this property called subscribe. So inside our subscribe, what we're going to get back is the data, and it's going to be a passenger array. So it's going to be an array of passengers. Inside our arrow function, we can then do this.passengers equals that data object. Now earlier on, we had our huge JSON object with all of our passengers inside that looks something like this. All we're doing is taking that data from our local database, asking for it via Angular's HTTP. We're converting the response from JSON. We're saying here that the type that we're returning will be an observable. Inside of here, we're simply using ng on init, so we're not using the constructor because you shouldn't use that for things like data requests. We want to initialize these when the component is in fact ready. And then we've called this.passenger service, which we've injected. We've called getPassengers, we've then subscribed, we've passed our data, which we need to then finally assign in this.passengers. So let's go back, and what we'll actually do is add a console login here, and we'll just say data, and then we'll just pass the data in. So we can actually see that this is coming from our new HTTP module. One thing you might need to do is restart the server, because anything we add in this db.json won't be locally recognized. So if you're using the integrated terminal, you can simply open it up and use Control-C to actually stop the process. Then we can just run a yarn start. So this will then go ahead and pick up on these live JSON changes. So now that we've done this, we've logged everything out. We can go back to the browser and check out our new database, which is being driven from an actual HTTP request. So when we go back to the browser, you can see that all of our items have been loaded. I can refresh and you can see that there's a slight delay coming back through these. Now there's actually an error going on in the console. So this is why we taught you the safe navigation operator, because when we make asynchronous requests, things that we reference in our templates might not be available. So this one is actually telling us that the passenger count component cannot read the property length of undefined. But you can in fact see our data array objects here. So these are actually coming back and being logged inside our application. What we'll do first is quickly neaten this up. So we're going to use an array function because we've had a look at our data coming back. So now that we are using the shorthand array function, you can see that everything is being done in 3 lines of code. So this is really clean. Our component has a service injected. We're making that call. We're subscribing to the call, and then we're just binding the result of that call. Now the problem was in fact inside this handle count component. Now this is because we are just passing this.passengers, which is bound inside of here, directly into here as an input. So when we open this up, we have input items, and then we have items.length. So what we need to do is add the safe navigation. We can save that out. We can close the file. So what Angular will do at this point is essentially wait for that property to be available. Once it becomes available, the change detection will fire, the input will get rebound, and the properties will display in the browser.